Great. Well, thank you
Hi.
so much for coming on to the podcast today. This is definitely a topic we don't know like anything about, and we're so glad that we're able to do it on Halloween. So I just wanted to start out kind of same way we like to start with everybody, which is kind of where did you start? What was spirituality like as a kid, and how did you what was your journey to being a Wiccan today?
Hi. Well, I'm very excited about this question. My name's Cassie Gendlek. I hail from the Washington Pacific Northwest area. I was born and raised in Washington. I grew up in a really big Republican New Jersey family. My whole family, my mom is one of six kids. And so when my grandfather got a job with Boeing, the short conversational version of the story is my grandfather got a job with Boeing, and then he flew over from New Jersey to Washington and took all the kids with him. In fact, like they had a whole plane, and they could only fill it up so far. And my grandfather turned to the rest of the kids and said, "Hey, you guys want to fill the plane? Let's go." And so they all went, and we all landed in Olympia, Washington, where we have a little New Jersey commune. And so I grew up Catholic, and I went to a Catholic school. Um, I I have so many mixed emotions about my Catholic school because it was I, when I arrived, I arrived in first grade. There's like one class per grade. Most schools that we're familiar with have multiple classes per grade, and we just had the one because it's a small school, right? And so I arrived in first grade, and all the kids had sort of already made friends with each other, and so I ended up being sort of the weirdo, like the weird pariah kid in the class, and I spent a whole bunch of time alone. um, I had some friends, and I had two really close friends who uh, like kind of, they sort of saw me and went, "Oh, look at the sad girl who's sitting by herself. Let's go hang out with her." And then we became very good friends. But I really felt alone while I was in school. When I was outside of school with them, it was like family. But when I was in school, it felt very lonely. And so I spent a lot of time talking to God. Um, I remember going to mass on Fridays at church, in school, and I'd go and I'd look at the rafters, like the ceiling rafters, and it's all wood grain, and I would look at all the wood grain and see where I could find the angels in the ceiling. Like that was I didn't have friends at school, but I had God, and that really was the formative experience of my life, was the fact that no matter where I could go, I had God and I had Jesus, and they were always with me. And and I knew it too. It wasn't like I had a question about it. I could feel God. I could feel God right there. I could see the angels flying around in the sky. I could, hear him talking to me. I could, like, hear the whispers of voices in the winds. And I know that sounds a little nutty, but as a kid, you don't really know how to explain this numinous feeling that you're experiencing. And so I became I was a very devout Catholic, and at like around 11 years old, I realized that I really wanted to be a nun, and I wanted to live that monastic lifestyle and really uh, immerse myself into God and immerse myself into faith, and really just like let it envelop me and surround me and be the world that I lived in. Like if reality is agreement based, that's the reality. Like I was going to go agree to be in that reality with all those other nuns. And so I was sort of gearing up for it at 11, and then I realized that I started having puberty, and I started having urges and questions, and things that could not easily be answered through faith, like uh, where where can I go to be a priest? Like, really, what I wanted to do was be a priest. I like the idea of being a nun because it was the only thing available. And when I realized that um, at an early age, I realized that I was very unlikely to be able to keep the vows that would be required of me. I really had a 11-year-old crisis of faith. And I really struggled with it. I tried to find a lot of answers of where I, as a faith-filled person, could fit in the Catholic Church in a way that I felt I was being called to, because I really did, at 11 years old, feel a calling, and I feel it to this day. Um, and so I started. I went to like youth groups, and I went to after school things and Bible camps and all kinds of stuff, and I loved it. I love every second. I cherish those memories. Uh, like a lot of ex-Catholics will come up to me and start telling me about their Catholicism or their ex-Catholicism, and I feel like I have this like pain of recognition of what they're going through. Like, I can see the struggle that they're going through, and I also have this like deep fondness for the faith and the beauty and the simplicity of it. Um, and so a few years later, I'm still struggling. I'm around 13 years old. Now I'm in high school. I've got friends, a lot of friends. I ended up, I, I probably shouldn't say this on the podcast, but I ended up flunking out of the Catholic school because I was being bullied so bad. And so around sixth grade, I just was like, I'm not doing homework anymore. And I just was like, I don't care. I don't want to be there. I don't want to participate. I just want to go be whatever I'm going to be. I just want to be grown up and get out of here. That's all I want. I'm just not going to participate anymore. And I ended up, I didn't lose my faith then, but I did like lose, I lost the church. And so I got into high school, and I had a bunch of friends, and my friends tend to be the weirdos because we are the weirdos, mister. And so uh, my friends, one of my good friends, Margot, came up to me one day, and she told me that she was a witch, and that she knew she was a witch because her fingernails, you know, when your fingernails grow out, they sort of grow down and around like that, like go, and get real long and weird looking. Uh, well, I shouldn't say weird looking. They are cool to some. That's true. Yay. And and I appreciate that, and I can appreciate the aesthetic value of it. And she told me that she knew she was a witch because her nails would grow upward when they grew out real long. And she's like, every third daughter of a third daughter of a third daughter in my family line has nails that grow upwards, so we're witches. And I was like, BS. I don't know if I can curse on your show, so
Please do.
Go for it. No problem.
okay. Thank you. I appreciate the freedom and being able to express myself how it come naturally to me. So yeah, I told her that was bullshit. And I was like, you can't just, how does that even work? And so the internet was new, and I went on to like Yahoo Messenger or Ask Jeeves or something like that, and early Google, and I looked up what is a witch, and I found a bunch of sites about Wicca, and I learned that it is a religion that is based off of the natural cycles of the world, that it follows the natural patterns that our planet goes through, and it believes that God is with us, present in, as we sit around and speak with each other. God's just wandering around doing what God's up to. So, but he's active, and he and she is active and with us. And so, um, there's so much more. There's so much more. That's just like the teeniest, tiniest taste of what Wicca actually is. And if you ask a Wiccan or a pagan or a witch or anybody who's of a non-Abrahamic faith, Western style occultism, you will find like two answers per person for every question that you ask. So if you ask like 12 pagans a question, you will get 24 different answers. It's crazy. Everybody's got an opinion, and everybody has a right to their experience, their lived experience, and that's a lot of what Wicca really focuses on, is how do you live your faith and have it be a part of your everyday? How do you live it so that this magic is with you all the time? That's that again. So yeah, there we go. Grain of salt. Every answer's got like two answers. Every question's got two answers at least, and I will rattle on about all of them until somebody stops me.
Yeah. So I'm interested. So you mentioned about the Wiccan belief that God is everywhere, right? So I kind of would like to unpack that a little bit more. So what is kind of and he mentioned that there's multiple answers, but what would you say is a Wiccan belief of a creator of the universe? Like, is there God? What does God look like? Who is God?
Right. So we view God, and now that I've said my warning of there's two answers for every question, I'm going to talk from here on out in my personal experience, and that way I can give people who've had a different experience who are still Wiccan their opportunity to be recognized as somebody who's valid in their faith, and also not exactly the same practice as mine. They have every right to their practice. So generally, what Wiccans believe about deity can be described in sort of a diamond model. That's what we like to call it sometimes. And the idea is that deity is unknowable. We inherently are limited by our bodies and our brains and our functionality. And there's just no way. It's impossible to fully comprehend the presence and essence of God, of deity. And so the way that Wiccans like to look at it is that deity is like to a giant diamond, and each facet of that diamond is different and has a different color and shows a different light, but it's still all the same diamond, right? You're just looking at different aspects. And so that the example that I like to give is let's say I was working on a weaving project, and I had this great big loom. I was going to do this big weaving on it. It was going to be super important to me. I really want some help. I really would love it if somebody, like, spiritually, deity, God, could come and like be with me while I'm working on this project, right? Well, I can ask Jesus. I could ask Jesus, and I could, be like, Jesus, will you please come down and hang out with me while I'm working on this weaving? I love your energy. I like the space that you give me, and you remind me of good, pleasant things, and I would love it if you were here. And Jesus, in when I hear him back in my head, and I know that I can't really speak for God, but when I do hear him in my head, he will say things like, well, I was a carpenter, so like if you wanted to build a loom, I'm great, and otherwise I'd love to sit here and support you and like hug you and tell you how much you're loved while you do this loom. And I could go, well, that's wonderful, but really I'm looking for more of like how to plan this accurately. Like, how are we going to execute this loom plan, this big project that I'm working on? Well, then I can turn to Athena, who's the goddess of weaving and a goddess of planning, and you can see why she's also a goddess of war when you think about how much trouble it is to set up a loom. I don't know if you guys have ever wove before. I have a fiber art degree from my college, so I like this example because I've lived it. Setting up a loom is really difficult and takes a lot of planning. And when I first set up my first loom, I was like, that's why she's the goddess of war. This is so much planning. And so, I can call Athena and have Athena sit and hang out with me while I'm doing my weaving, and she'll be like, yes, you should use this color. Yes. No, this is incorrect. You will be very unhappy if you continue down this path. And if I was to ever be like, oh my gosh, I'm in a huge problem, like I'm having this crisis in my life, I could turn to Athena, and Athena would be like, I'm covered in armor. I'm sorry. I've got bronze everywhere. You don't want to scuff it. And I could turn to Jesus and he'd be like, girl, come here, get a hug, So the idea is that these two energies, though they're different and though they come from a different culture, in the long run are all connected to deity. And when I am asking Athena, I'm asking the same deity as when I'm asking Jesus. They're just giving me a different face so that I can relate better. So if you're, there's all kinds of all fathers out there in the world. You've got Odin, you've got Zeus. Even in some sense, you have the goddesses like Hecate, who are sort of like an all mother, or Isis. And these deities sort of represent the idea of like Big Papa God, the all father, the person who is our father in this circumstance, in this faith, in this thing that we're working with. And each of those all fathers sort of have a different flavor to them. So if you're doing something that requires a specific flavor, then you get to ask those deities if they'd be willing to participate with you, and communicate with them individually, because yeah, there we go. I hope that answered that.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I mean, that's inspiring, I'd say. I think with the because I feel like that doesn't take value away from other people's spirituality, which is, I think,
Right.
where it's like, hey, like, yeah, like you could totally experience that. I can totally see why you have that. And here's like, and I'd like to use that too. Like I'd like to use that spirituality. Right. That's really cool. What are?
Yeah, it makes really fun interfaith gatherings. Like,
yeah,
they love it when I come dressed up in pagan and bust out with the church songs. It's fun. It's a lot of fun being able to relate so intimately with people, because I don't have to deny them their faith, their lived experience. I get to sort of be a part of their reality and be in it with them, and I get this opportunity to help people of many faiths, not just my own, because even though I know that it's not my faith, I still see that their experience is completely valid, even if it's far, far different from my own. I always tell people biodiversity is not just for the rainforest. Like, we as humans need diverse thoughts and ideas on the planet in order for us to survive. When we have a monoculture, we have potato famines. So when we have a monoculture of thought, we have the potential for us to get really, really lost in not being able to find solutions, because the way that we see the world cannot provide those solutions. And when you have people who think a bunch of different ways about how the world works and about how faith and belief work, then you have opportunities for finding answers that you would not normally have seen because your eyes aren't trained for it, right? A good example of that is I went to Parliament of the World Religions in Toronto recently, the last Parliament of the World Religions, and the theme of the event was working with how to help people relate to the earth better with their faith. A lot of the speakers that I talked to and listened to, and we're talking about how there's this like great exodus of people, the unchurched masses. People are leaving the churches in droves. And I stood up and I said to them, in the, I'm this like little, I'm 30 something. Like I feel very confident in my faith, but I definitely recognize that I'm in a huge, like, surrounded by religious leaders that are way above my pay grade and understanding. And so I was like, screw it, let's do it. And I stood up and I raised my hand and I said, you guys, your people aren't leaving faith. They're going to us. they're coming to us because there are aspects about your faith that they can't reconcile, and they need help being able to hold on. Losing your faith is such a hard thing. And when people who are survivors of spiritual abuse are, knocking down our doors, we catch them and we hold on to them and try to help them, even though we're generally survivors of spiritual abuse ourselves as pagans. Most people who are pagan have come from another religion and have survived some ordeal and went, oh, I can't stay here because of this. And they come from a very broken place a lot of the times. And so you've got like the broken trying to heal the broken together, and we found that with the people's backgrounds, they come from everywhere, that a lot of times we can find a lot of interesting faith solutions where people are normally have blind spots up. So yeah, I hope that answered that.
Yeah, no, I think that's amazing, especially coming from like a place of spiritual abuse myself, where I think when you face that, it's almost like there's kind of three phases where like you have like religion, and then below that faith, and then below that spirituality. And what happens, I feel like oftentimes, is through spiritual abuse, you will lose like both religion and your like, which is I guess the belonging to something, and then the faith, which is believing in something. And then you're just kind of in this place of like, well, I need to find spirituality somewhere, but you just don't always know where to access it because it's a big world out there.
Right.
When you fall out of
it's a big world out there. Well, and it feels so unsafe. Like when you lose your faith, and you're losing, like you said, you're losing your religion and you're losing your faith. You're losing your community and you're losing confidence in your beliefs. Like your core beliefs get shook, and that it gives you this feeling of, I don't know what's true or not. I don't know what's real. I don't know. I don't have the ability to be secure in myself because these like foundational things, our beliefs, have been so severely shook. It is quite the problem. I started right after I started my sabbatical. I started my sabbatical because I was working with an international pagan organization that's based here in Washington State. And I can talk more about them in a bit, but I want to, when I left that church, I left because I was experiencing extreme burnout, ministerial burnout and ministerial fatigue. And I'd also severely injured myself. And I had a very bad back injury. And so I had to leave so that I could focus on me. And that wasn't necessarily a crisis of faith. What happened after that was I ended up getting excommunicated from my pagan church, which I didn't think that was a thing. In all of my study, I've been a pagan since I was 13. I'm 35 now. I got excommunicated from my church, and I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. So that led to a huge crisis of faith in me, and having my body not working, and my core beliefs, never mind my core muscles, my core beliefs weren't working. And that was very traumatic. I ended up, my fiance Nate reached out to a counselor in Portland called named Connie Baker, and I highly, I don't know if you guys know of her, I highly recommend Connie Baker.
Is that the
She's
one that you recommend?
incredible.
Yeah, I recommended Connie to Ashton, so.
Which I still haven't acted on.
Oh, she is an angel. She's an angel. She is absolutely one of the most generous and thoughtful and just willing to be right there with you people. You know, like she's like willing to dig right in with you, right next to you, in order to like help you navigate your way out of this. You know, she's incredible. I love her. I barely know her, and I love her.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned you were excommunicated, because I think that also goes to show, you know, you brought up the mass exodus of people leaving faith or at least religious institutions, and I think a lot of that is that I think that faith community is so important, but it's a fine balance, right, of like being in kind of this like structured community, but also like spirituality in itself isn't meant to be in a confined box. And I think that that's why it's been such a weird time. I just think with where religious institutions are going, and you see all these people leaving. I find that interesting, especially because I've met a decent amount of, you know, Christian pagans, and like what that is kind of all about. And I think that for a lot of Christians who leave the church, kind of what you were mentioning, you can find a lot of positivity in kind of the pagan beliefs.
I was absolutely a Christian pagan for a long time. Like there were many years where I was like, I can't just leave Catholicism. Like I believe it. And then when I started looking into other pagan avenues, I found that there were other faiths that also bit from Catholicism and faith. And I say bit very like lovingly. Out of necessity and a necessity to survive, some other faiths have borrowed Catholic ideas and incorporated it into their own. And so that, like finding that and understanding it helped me navigate how to get through into something that I could confidently believe in, because I believe that I believe God was calling me, that God or goddess was calling me to be a priest, and that I was worth putting the effort in. And so I found a faith that would allow me to do the calling that I feel. And that's how I really feel about it, is I have a extreme fondness for Catholic ideas. I do not consider myself Catholic or even a Christian Wiccan anymore, even though I did for a little while. I consider myself fully pagan. I feel like I've sort of gotten out of the Christian like culture. The Christian culture is so fascinating to me now, because it feels so foreign to me.
Interesting.
And I never thought that Christianity could feel foreign to me, even though it's extremely familiar to me. It, like, sometimes Christians will come and they'll want to talk about things, and they'll talk about concepts that I'm like, wow, that doesn't compute.
I'm interested in that, because you brought up your kind of your weaving example, right? And you brought up that, like, you know, when you're in a situation or whatever, you could call on Jesus or Athena, who I want to get to because I have no idea who Athena is.
Oh, fun.
Greek goddess of war.
Yeah.
But in the context,
Jehovah's Witness, ex-Jehovah's Witness for the win.
But like, so as far as like calling, you know, Jesus into that situation, is that more of the lens of like, for you personally, is that believing that Jesus was like one of the deities? Is he like the son of God? Like, how, because you mentioned that you're no longer like, could classify yourself as like a Christian pagan,
right,
or anything like that. I don't know. I'm interested to unpack that a little bit more.
Have you ever watched American Gods?
No, I don't think so.
It sounds familiar though.
It's a American Gods is originally a book by Neil Gaiman, and he turned it into a TV show, and it's really, really fun. It talks about the idea of the things that Americans worship, like becoming embodied into people, like things like media, things like oh gosh, now I can't remember any of the other characters, but um, those ideas are brought up and worked into like a personhood. And in that show, and the reason why I bring this up is in the show they have this really fun scene of a bunch. They go to Ostara's house. Ostara is the goddess of where we get Easter from. She's a goddess of the spring, and her her animals are things like hares and baby animals and eggs and things that are just being born, little lambs and things that are just being born up in the spring, life coming back to us, that she's a goddess of that. And it's where we get the word Easter from. And so there's this really fun scene of the crew, the main people in the plot, going over to Ostara's house to sort of chat with her, and she's hosting all of these different kinds of Jesuses. Like there's like a white Jesus and he's hanging out in the pool, and there's like a black Jesus over there, and there's a Korean Jesus hanging out over there. Like it's all these different kinds of Jesuses. So when you think about it, Jesus is so many, he's so many different things to so many different people, that trying to put him into some kind of box is sort of fruitless. Like trying to go, well, he's definitely a part of, you can go, he's definitely part of Jehovah's pantheon. Like, you know, you could say Jehovah's all father, and that Jesus is his son, and that that there's the Holy Spirit in there, and they have a pantheon. But really, the answer is, it depends on how you relate to Jesus. And people relate to him in all kinds of different ways. So for me personally, I see him like, my Jesus is the guy who hangs out with all of the saints, and they all get together and scheme to make sure that we're all taken care of. So like, I'll talk to St. Jude a lot. St. Jude is my family's patron saint. My Aunt Judy's named after St. Jude. And so my version of Jesus is like in a family relating to all of these saints and sinners and God. And I sort of like see him hanging out in heaven doing his thing, and I'm all moving my phone around gesturing. I see him hanging around in heaven doing his thing and doing it well. And so I guess I don't really have a way that I like to put Jesus. Again, putting him in a box is sort of pointless, because there's just so many different kinds of Jesuses out there. So it's definitely a challenging question. But overall, I think that he is so wide and just so loving and forgiving that he can really encompass a lot of ideas about love and about loss. And really, it's when I'm in places of like grieving or real loss, or especially when my family members are passing or having real trouble, I will absolutely turn to Jesus, and I'll pray to him and Mary and St. Jude and all of everybody who will listen on behalf of my family member. And that's usually now at times it's generally the only way I really work with him these days, because I'm so immersed with the rest of pagan culture that he just doesn't come up. Most people in paganism don't really like talking about it. I'm just going to put that out there.
Yeah.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
I'm curious, kind of to shift gears a little bit, because I know getting out of the place I was with faith and then transitioning, one of the main things that's helped me, I've researched some Buddhism, and while I'm no Buddhist, the practice involved in it has been like a real breath of fresh air. And so I'm curious for like Wiccans and pagans, what the practices involved kind of are.
Okay, so we have we use a basically you can liken Wiccan faith to a giant clock. We have if you look at a clock, well, I guess that's sort of a silly analogy right now that I'm thinking about it, but we have 8 points of the year that that correlate with the position that the sun is at in the sky at any given point. So like things like the equinoxes, the solstices, they are positions where the sun is at in the sky that are meaningful, that represent transitionatory periods that the sun is going through. And we tend to think of the sun as the symbol for male energy. And so it can represent like the cycles of man, it and I mean like men, like not like all of us, I mean specifically male-bodied individuals, assigned male at birth, I should say. And we believe that the sun cycle sort of relates to the cycles that men go through. And it also talks about like where our harvest seasons are at, where our grieving seasons are at, where our growing seasons are at, where our partying seasons are at, you know? And so we get to go, oh, well, today's Samhain. Today is Samhain, and that means that the veils between the worlds are very thin. It's the last of 3 harvest festivals. And typically it's the last harvest festival that you get before you get into like the part of winter where you can't really grow things anymore and you have to go out and hunt. So it represents sort of like the thinness of the veil between living and dead, because we have to go out and kill things in order to survive so that we can eat. And like the holiday, the Sabbath, talks about grieving, and it talks about letting go, and it talks about what do you do now that you're dead. Like now that we're in the dead part of the year, it talks about gratitude for the people who've gone before us, and the animals and the trees and the different aspects of the planet that have all gone before us. And it really talks about what do we do now that we're on the other side. Like, and that's sort of a weird thing to talk about. So we pagans believe that we are reborn, and that we experience life on earth in order to learn different lessons and sort of like take them back. And as our souls evolve, we kind of have to keep coming back and relearning new lessons and going through it. And so when Samhain hits, it's a recognition that we are going to die. All of us eventually someday will not be here anymore. And that there is life after that. And it talks about what the journey is after you get into life, after you get out of life, because then you go from Samhain to Yule, which is a celebration of you guys would see Christmas. Yule is a celebration of like the new light that is there. Oh my gosh, I love talking about Christmas traditions. So you know the tree that you bring into your home and you get it all decorated, that tree represents the goddess. And you're inviting this lonely goddess who's out in the cold, who's in the dark and in the cold, and you're inviting her in, and you're decorating her, and you're giving her a warm place to be, and you're adoring her with gifts. And that goddess figure comes in and gives you a bunch of presents in return, right? Santa comes down the tree, St. Nicholas. So there are many, many different origin stories for Santa. Some pagans believe that he's a pagan deity of old. And a lot of pagans believe that he's a construct of Coca-Cola. Either way, works for me. And so the idea that like Santa comes and you can ask him for wishes, and as the old man of the year, he can give you tools that you can use for your new year to help you get through. And then at that same time, uh, you've got the Yule log, right? You guys are familiar with the Yule log. So the Yule log is a representation of, when you look on TV and you see this like log burning in a fire, that is the Yule log. It is a representation of us burning away the things that are not working for us. If you're familiar with the term dull care, things that are holding us hostage in our hearts and our minds, like grief, um, like the mistakes that you've made over the year, uh, the things that you wish you could take back, things about your nature that are keeping you sort of like anxiety, things that are sort of hold you down. You have this opportunity to pass it over to the Yule log. Like, okay, Yule log, I'm going to give you my grief, and I give it to you. I release it from me, and I give it to you, and I appreciate that you're going to go take it into the other side of, you're going to take it into the fire and burn it and transmute it and make it into something different for me. So yeah, there's like 6 other holidays. I don't want to go into all of them because I can't talk about all of them. I have to look a lot of them up even still, just because there's so much. And in addition to the 8 Sabbats, you've also got 13 moons, and the moons represent female energy, like people who were assigned female at birth, energy. And so those mysteries tend to be more inner focused because it's in the middle of the night. It's the moon represents not only female energy, but it represents sort of like who your inner world, sometimes who you are on the inside, like how you occur to you as opposed to how you occur to other people out in the world. That sun signs, moon signs, blah blah blah, astrology. And so when every full moon comes around, a bunch of witches will go out and go dance around under the full moon. And sometimes you look up your astrology chart and see what the stars say about the sky. And sometimes you go, oh, it's a honeymoon. Oh, it's a blue moon. Oh, it's a wolf moon. And you know what that means. And you can go out and celebrate the kind of moon that it is right then, right there. You can go out and do magic that will help you. Magic meaning like really intense, complicated prayers. You can do magic that will sort of help you along with the next part of your month. You're like, oh, this last month was crazy. Okay, I'm gonna make money. Woo, we're gonna make so much money. I'm gonna be great. I'm not gonna have to worry about this. Okay, money, money, money. And you get under the full moon, you're like, money, 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 money. And then next thing you know, you get slightly T-boned by a car and your insurance pays out buco. You know what So that has happened. That has happened to me.
Yeah, that's a good segue. I mean, I definitely like that. First, I like that you brought up kind of the the pagan symbolism found in Christmas, because I know a lot of Christians who don't even realize that the reason why Christmas and Easter fall on the days that they do is because of the pagan calendar. Jesus,
why I didn't get to celebrate them.
Yeah, that's why I actually didn't get to celebrate, because Jesus probably. What?
Please go ahead.
And like Easter specifically, it changes dates on you because it's based on the cycle of the moon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I first found that out, I was like, whoa, I can't believe it. And it really did feel like, wow, because Catholicism was built on indigenous beliefs. Like Catholicism came in the Dark Ages after the plague came through and wiped everybody out. And we're not unfamiliar with that right now. And so when the Black Plague came through, they didn't have science, they didn't have hand washing, they didn't have nothing. as far as knowledge about how to combat this disease. And so they went, oh, God's punishing us. We have to become better with God. And so you get this religious, like, what's the word? I don't want to say fear, like religious, like, religion, and everybody became more religious in response to the idea that God was punishing everyone, right? And so when you've got people who are, even before that, you've got things like the Crusades and Ireland, and the Saint Patrick chasing off all the snakes. Christian religions, Catholic religions came in and at first they went, well, we're going to have to like tear down all of the statues and kill all of their gods in order to subdue and colonize this land. And after many, decades of that not working very well for them, they went, well, maybe if we tell them that their gods are just like our gods, then they won't fight so hard. And that's what they did. So like if you look at a lot of Irish saints, a lot of Irish saints are like Saint Brede are actually pagan goddesses and gods that have been turned into saints in order to colonize the land. And so when I realized that my faith was already relating to what I felt was an indigenous heritage for me that I didn't have access to, my own indigenous heritage, that I'm an American. I'm, as much as I was born in Washington and raised in Washington, my family's from Germany, and they came over in the 1800s and we're here. And how wonderful would it be if I could look back and find records of ancient Germanic culture that I can, relate to. I've got a genetic link to it. I'm adopted too, so don't get me into like family and genetics and adoption. We will never end this interview. I won't shut up.
Well, I think a lot of that's really cool, especially what's fascinating to me is talking about the following the cycles of the sun and moon. I mean, I feel like those roots have to go so deep into the history of humans as a species, with even like with Stonehenge being one of the, or I think it's the oldest identified structure in that we know about in human history, and that's tied to the sun and like sun worship and stuff like that. And I feel like that's so much of that's connected to kind of what you're talking about too, which is amazing.
Yeah,
right.
Super cool.
I was gonna ask, because you briefly touched on it, and this is the question I've always had, is kind of about what magic is within the pagan context, and also what like classifies a witch, like who's a witch and who's not, and what is magic, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so the questions I'm hearing is, what is magic and what makes you a witch?
Yes.
Okay. Magic is really complicated prayer with props. So when you're, are you familiar with praying a rosary or mala beads?
Yeah.
That is a kind of, people who practice it would be like offended if I said that's a kind of magic, but it is. It's using this tool to help you focus your prayer, and to using different corresponding elements that relate to your prayer and incorporating them into your prayer. When I do magic, I was trained in a British Gardnerian style, and that to Wiccans that will be kind of understandable. Not every Wiccan will understand that, but many will. So I was trained in a Gardnerian style, which doesn't mean it's actually Gardnerian. There's many traditions within Wicca, many like schools of thought and schools of practice, and not all of them agree, but all of them are valid. It's just whatever works for you works for you. if you uh, essentially, if you feel this like, sorry, if you feel this, if you feel a calling that there's a god and a goddess out there, uh, and you look up Wicca and you're like, wow, that stuff sounds like me, then you're pretty much a Wiccan. like there's not really any. Can you guys hear the dinging that's coming through my phone? I hope not. My fiance just woke up from a nap and he's messaging me and he doesn't realize I'm talking. Poor guy. Anyways, it's dinging all up in my ears and I'm like, I hope that's not coming through. So yeah, if you look up the faith and you find something in it that speaks to you and you're like, you know what, I might actually be a Wiccan, then you're a Wiccan. Then you're a witch. Even if you're like, well, I'm mostly like Christian. Like I know so many Christians who like have all of their superstitions, they have all of their things that they do and they do with their praying, like again, rosary beads, prayer cards, lighting candles, all of those things help you focus your praying. And so we as Wiccans go, well, maybe we can study this and find out what are the different ways that people can pray and what are the different ways that people can like raise energy with each other and sort of think together and work on praying together in groups. Uh, what we call those covens, when people are all praying together in groups, they all want to be in a family of people who that they trust and can explore intimate ideas with, and those people would be called a coven if they're doing magic with each other. I hope that helps. Does that explain it?
Yeah, it does. I think it helps. So the concept would be that like a prayer circle, right? Like about, because I went to one like pagan festival once and everybody was in a circle kind of like chanting. So would that be considered a prayer?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. There are I wish that I had looked this up before I got here. There are 8, we call them 8 paths to power, and it's funny how often the numbers 8 and 12 and 3 and 4, 7 will come up in Wicca. There seems to be a natural pattern within the universe that uses these numbers. I'm sure scientists would sit there and be like, yes, you were sort of correct, you crazy pagan. But scientists will even talk about how there's a certain set of numbers that sort of keep emerging when you look at the ancient world, or when you look at the natural world, like what's the thing with the spiral? I don't think it's the Pythagorean theorem. Anyways, there's different.
The Nordic knot. No,
I was thinking, it's the, what's the thing that goes 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 11, or 8, 13? I can't remember.
I don't know. I'm thinking of pi. That's where my mind
it's definitely
went.
not pi.
Yeah, it's not pi, but it's this theory. It's this mathematical theory that creates perfect spirals in nature, and you see these perfect spirals. You put like a 1-inch square next to a 1-inch square, next to a 2-inch square, next to a 3-inch square, next to a 5-inch square, next to an 8-inch square, and you draw a line through all the middle of all those boxes. You get this perfect spiral everywhere. You see it in everything. And I don't know why I brought that up. I just like talking about it, I guess. I'm sort of blanking right now.
The golden spiral.
Is it called the golden spiral?
Yes.
Yes.
Golden spiral.
I should have known that because that's used in like design all the time. But, like it's like a naturally beautiful thing. It's like such an interesting thing where it's like that naturally appeals to the eye, which I think is fascinating.
Yeah.
Right.
It's 1.
I remember. So.
Yeah, it's 1.618 and represented by the Greek letter pi.
Oh yeah, pi. Yeah, I love pi. Pi's great. It's a fun number. It makes great songs. So I was saying the reason why I brought it up was because uh, we believe that there are 8 paths to power. So there's things like chanting and drumming and dancing and holding your breath for a really long time and like kneeling down on your knees, and your knees get really, like, your knees lose all their blood. Like if you're kneeling in prayer for a long time and you get up and you get a head rush, on a very fundamental basic level, that is used in just about every religion, and it is the path to power. And so when you look at the common elements in prayer from around the world, you can start to see these. Okay, so they're using chanting, and they're using kneeling, and they're using meditation, and they're using singing, and you can sort of like go through this whole list of ways that people pray. And so our magical forefathers uh, sort of put this into the idea of 8 paths to power. And if you can incorporate as many of those ideas, those paths, into your working as as will fit comfortably. So like not all of the paths are going to work together very well because there's just a lot going on. So like if you're doing dancing and you're doing like kneeling and and you're just like, you kneel a bunch, your legs go numb, and then you get up and you fall over, like it sometimes the paths of power don't really work very well together, depending on how you're working with them. But if you can incorporate as many of them in at the same time into your prayer, you can come out of it with a very effective, powerful prayer. Uh, and the ultimate goal in Wicca of praying, I feel, is of doing magic, is to create actual change. And sometimes, really most of the times, the way that we create actual change is by changing ourselves, by changing our perspective. And when you do prayer and you do you do magic, you light your candles, you kneel, you sing, you chant. If you do that enough, you can slowly change your perspective to fit how you want to see, how you to fit your magic. So um if I am I'm a tarot reader by trade, right? So I'd read tarot over the phone for a company online. It's wonderful. I love it. And a lot of people will call me and be like, where's my boyfriend? Like, when's my next boyfriend going to come? And I will tell people that what you want to do, here, I'll give you the spell. I tell people this all the time. I'll give you this spell. What you do is you write down everything that you want in a boyfriend. Like, write down from his personality to the size of his, so everything that you've ever wanted. And you can reference other boyfriends that you've had in the past. You can reference, people on TV. You can write down, I want blonde hair and blue eyes. You can write down anything that you want as long as you want it. And you pray over this document in a way that's comfortable for you. Some people prefer to pray in a very sexually explicit manner, which is considered sacred in Wicca. And so some people will do that with their list of how they want their boyfriend to come and they to appear in their life. And so the idea is that you list everything that you want, and that there's so many people on the planet that there's got to be somebody out there to fit the bill, right? Like I've got my shopping list made. I know this is what I want. I've written 3 pages of details about this dude. He's got to be out there somewhere. You write it down. That's part of the spell. You do the like, okay, goddess, please, send a beacon out to this guy and tell him to get to me quick because I really want him right now. And then you wait and see what happens. Well, on one level, it's like, yeah, you're writing down everything that you want, but really what you're doing underneath it all is you're awakening your own eyes to seeing the things that you want in the people around you. So when you like, instead of focusing on, oh, I really don't want to have a relationship like that one again, that would be really nice not to have that kind of relationship. Instead, you think, well, what's the relationship that I want? And you focus on it and you focus on it and you focus on it until it's in your brain and you remember it, every detail of it. You focus and focus and focus. And the next thing you know, it's the only thing you can see. You all of a sudden you're just seeing blonde-haired, blue-eyed dudes everywhere. They're all mysteriously 6 foot, tall, and they fit the bill. And some of them have like long story short, that's how I found my fiance. I'm just gonna put that out there like that.
Yeah, that's
And I told him that too. I found my list that I drew up. When we were moving, I found my list and I went, oh my God, baby, I have the order sheet for you. Like, sweetheart, look, and look how right I turned out to be. I can't, and like his presence in my life was magical. Like, it still is magical. He just like showed up and was perfect. And like he can talk for himself about his relationship history, but like us meeting together was like, the only way I can explain it is goddess. Literally the only way for us to be able to come together in the way that we did. The only way I can explain it is goddess, and the power of being able to open my eyes to see what I want and not just see what I didn't want everywhere. You know what I mean?
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's cool. I didn't, I also found a 6 foot blonde haired guy, but I didn't write it down.
Well, sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes you just know.
Well, I think that's
Sometimes you really got to think about it because you're like, I don't even know what I want. And that's when you want to write. If you know, then you know. Good job.
I think that's interesting too. Just, I mean, the idea of just kind of opening yourself up to this, like the power, like some external power. I know, like there's just certain times where like, and it goes into more of the like unexplainable things for me, where there's certain times where you just like open yourself up to these things so much and you're like so vulnerable that like, and it usually doesn't happen in the way that you expect it to happen, but like it's crazy. And that's like where my brain goes when like the Bible says, for instance, faith moves mountains, where it's like the craziest things will happen when it's just like you get so vulnerable and you kind of go crazy in how much you believe in something.
Yeah.
And then like, I don't know, it's interesting. Especially
when we're talking about faith moving, oh, sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Talking about faith moving mountains, I want to, when I was at Parliament of the World Religions, they were talking about our relationship as people of faith to the earth and how to like reconnect ourselves. And there was a wonderful organization called, I think it's called Green Faith. And what they do is they go around to different faith communities and help people see how taking care of the earth is actually a responsibility that we as people of faith have. And they will go through and point out all the Bible passages that talk about how we're supposed to be taking care of the earth, and trying to connect people's belief with activism. Because you can go and ask a bunch of people, will you go help this old lady move into her nursing home? And people will be like, I got kids to pick up. I have to do things. Sorry. But if you go, the Bible says that it is our responsibility to take care of our elders. And this is an elder in our community who needs some help. What do you say to that person of faith? And they go, I'm a person of faith. Of course I believe that we need to take care of our elders. Let's go move this lady into her place. Woohoo, let's be party, So that faith can move mountains. You are absolutely right. Faith can move mountains. And when you have faith that is when you have faith that is reinforced with personal experience, you can get through a lot of the more painful aspects about being a person of faith, as we all experience. Not, being a person of faith, whatever faith you are, is a challenge, unless you're very fortunate to be surrounded in a community that believes the exact same thing as you. And we don't. And so being able to be secure in our faith, because we can connect it with lived experience that roots it in us, like we lived it, so you can't take it away from us even when you excommunicate us. That's a powerful, powerful thing. I don't, it just, the loss of faith is so painful, and I wish that I could talk about it more eloquently, and I really, really feel for people who are really struggling, and I always want to give them support that you can find it. You can thoughtfully and with a lot of curiosity and love find your faith again, however you need to find it. If you just like, I don't really want to be a part of religion anymore, I want this much faith, then that's great. That's wonderful. Welcome. Be welcome. If you're like, I need to change how I think about the entire world and I need help, then that's wonderful. And let's do it together, and we will come up with creative solutions to get you to where you want to be in your life. Because again, biodiversity is important, and we all need to have ideas, and we all need to be able to contribute so that we can solve complex problems that we're facing, especially between other humans and between humans and our planet.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. It's I think that's just so many words that people I think need to hear, and like
Thanks.
take in for sure, because I know I've been through similar places and learned similar things that, like, especially for me too, if I think about where I was 2 years ago to 2.5 years ago, like if I heard somebody say that to me, I'd be like, man, wow.
Yeah,
I could really use that.
I love the whole like terminology of biodiversity. That's just something I haven't really like heard in the multi-faith interfaith realm, and I think that's like a really good point. To kind of start wrapping it up, I mean, we've covered a lot of cool stuff. I think I've learned a lot. For people listening, I'm assuming, at least for right now, most of our audience are people who are not pagan. What would you want listeners to kind of take away from this episode, take away from your journey and your beliefs?
What I wish that people take away from this podcast episode, I want them to come away feeling like their pagan brothers and sisters are still on their side. That even though there's a lot of hurt from a lot of pagans because of the way that they've been treated, I've never met, I can't say never because absolutes are automatically lying. I can't remember a time where I've come across a pagan who hasn't been anything more than generous and loving and there to support you. Like, if you ever need help, know that your witch friends are absolutely going to be there for you. They're not trying to dissuade you from being you. They're just trying to help you out and be there with you. And I hope that gets communicated, that we're all brothers and sisters, and that we all really do need each other. When I was still trying to be Christian and Catholic, I went to a Calvary church event, and I was just starting to be pagan, and one of the people at the church sort of caught on to me because I didn't know how to answer a bunch of questions about what I believed at the time. I was very new, and it was very difficult to talk about, like use language to explain how I believed in the world. And she was like, you're a pagan, you're a pagan. And I was like, well, yes, but if you look at the Bible, you guys are asked to convert people, right? God wants you to go out and spread the good news. Jesus wants you to go out and tell everybody the good news. So you have to have somebody to spread it to. I'm right here. Hooray, look, I'm right here. You need me. Turns if I'm already Christian, you can't do your mission. Bye. So let's instead of trying to force me to be involved in your belief, let's have a beautiful conversation about how each of us are unique in our beliefs, and compare and contrast and see where we are actually more similar than we're different. And I think that those kinds of conversations are extremely powerful. Extremely powerful.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the main thing I love about that, and the thing that I've been trying to grow in with spirituality, is when we talk to people of different beliefs, whether we think they're wrong or not, instead of being like, well, you're wrong in this and this and this, it's more of like, hey, this is what I do that I think could really help you, and I would love to learn ways of your beliefs that could really help me, which sounds a lot like kind of where you're coming from, which is amazing.
Yeah. You know what's really fun is I'm actually really grateful that you're here too, and that you're when I found out that you're an ex-Jehovah's Witness, I was like, oh boy. Like, I've had so many Jehovah's Witnesses come over to my house, and Mormon missionary people too, come over to my house, and I'll invite them in and we'll sit down and have like just the most awesome conversation, and I make sure that they have access to water and food and a bathroom, and people who are out on their ministerial path, out on their missionary path, feel free to come over to my house, because I like talking with you. It's fun. I have a good time, and you will at least have access to a bathroom.
Nice. I know I definitely did those back in the day.
Yeah.
I guess to finally, because it's been an awesome conversation, and I feel sorry that we have to end it, because I feel like there's so much more we could talk about.
I know there is. I would love to come back and talk with you guys about it some more. I'm having a wonderful time.
Maybe we'll do like a part 2 or something.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to talk more on the show. I guess just to
I'll wear my ritual robes so that you guys can see what they look like, and I'll get all my tools out, and if you really want, we can like do a prayer together, and it would be a lot of fun.
That could be cool. Yeah. That could be super fun. Awesome. Yeah, I think just kind of final thing is, where can people learn more about you and what you do, and also just kind of what's going on in your world and stuff.
Well, I again, right now I'm on sabbatical. I'm still healing and recovering from my back injury. I got in a car accident in 2018, and so it's been a really, really bumpy road. And I needed the time off. When I have plans in the works for starting a new local coven in the area, and I have plans in the works for starting a new nonprofit organization that I'm kind of working into it. It's like a cross between a church and a club. Like I want people to be able to feel free to go and worship, but I want to avoid the idea of a priesthood having authority over your experience. At most, I believe that a priesthood should facilitate your experience and be able to be there to help you through what you're working through, as opposed to dictate to you what you should be thinking and believing. And so I find that even in pagan churches, that can be quite a challenge, because our main models are other churches. So a lot of times you'll have a church structure that is hierarchical, and you'll have different religious officers who do both like mundane clerical work and religious work, and that can really become a challenge sometimes. So my hope for this new nonprofit that I'm trying to build, that I'm still working out plans for, that's based off of how this one guy thinks a starship should run on Star Trek. um, I'm hoping that we can accomplish necessary ideas like integrity and accountability and safety and healing through religious abuse. Because again, like I said, most people who are pagan have the vast, unless you were born into the religion, which is that is, there are many pagans who have pagan parents now. We have generational pagans now. Our faith is really not even 100 years old yet. And we have generational pagans now. And so sometimes you get people who are just straight up born into it, but the vast majority of pagans are come to paganism because of religious abuse from where they were being raised. And so I want to have a place where anybody, especially pagans, but anybody can come and process issues of spiritual abuse and feel like there is a solid structure that is based in integrity and accountability, that at any point you can go up to any of your leaders and say, no. No, that is harmful and not correct, and we need to work on this together, and that those leaders will respond and be able to create an effective solution. That's as opposed to going up to your pagan leaders and going, "Ooh, I don't agree," and then going, well, that's what the goddess told me, which I mean, pagans are as varied as people. And so you can get all types, and the vast majority are wonderful. And there are some places that work for some people and don't work for others. And that's valid. And if it works for them, that's wonderful. I want to build a place that will work for me